Joey Odom and Heath Wilson allow digital devices to disrupt their family time and interaction with their children. They missed significant events in the lives of their children simply by being engaged with their screens instead of with their kids. So they decided to make some radical changes before it was too late. They are now on mission to help other families cut down on screen time and enjoy meaningful family interaction. Here's my conversation with Joey Odom and Heath Wilson. Well, I want to welcome Joey Odom and Heath Wilson to today's podcast. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Oh, what a pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Joey and Heath are writers, speakers, podcasters, co-founders of RO. And RO is, I think, an amazing device to help families manage phone times and get moms and dads and kids back into some intentional relationships in the home and personal interaction. And we'll talk about RO in a bit, but wanted the audience to get to know you guys a little bit. So now I do have to say, Joey, I listened to your podcast and your introductions are like works of art. So I feel like I'm behind the ball already. Just with that introduction.
That's nice. Those are very fun to work on, and can be a little bit last minute and a tad bit stressful. But thank you.
It's a superpower. It is a superpower. It's fun to watch these guests.
I was amazed. Tell me about your families. I know Heath, you have 4 children. Joey, you have 2. Heath, start with you. Tell about your wife. How long you guys been married, and the ages of your kids.
Yeah, we will. My wife's name is Misty. We will have been married 22 years in April, so we're moving on up there. And I recommend marriage to everyone. It's just been an amazing journey for us. I don't say that in jest. When we meet young couples that are engaged or newly married, we layer on the comments about how wonderful of a journey they're going to be on. So we have 4 kids. Our 2 oldest are twins, boy-girl twins. They are off to college here in about 6 months. So we are, close to launching a couple of them. They're actually staying close by. They're going to the University of Tennessee here in Knoxville, so it's going to be fun to have them 20, 30 minutes down the road. They are not living at home. I just want to clarify that. They are going on campus. People ask me, I'm like, no. That was never in consideration. We have a sophomore in high school, almost 16, and then we have a 14-year-old daughter as well. So our journey includes infertility, it includes adoption, a lot of ups and downs, but we've just been blessed along the way, and we're so proud of them and the decisions they're making. And man, kind of excited to move into the next stage of life where, I think you're in that stage now where your kids move on to different relationships and new challenges and are out of the house and fending for themselves in a way.
Man, there's a lot of emotions when those first kids go off to college. You get twins going off, a twofer.
Yeah, I like to say that I'm excited, and my wife will be in the fetal position for a few weeks. So we'll work that out.
Joey, tell us about your family.
Yeah, sure. My wife, Kristen, and I, we've been married for 20 years this year. So we've been together for a long time, and we have a 15-year-old son, Harrison, and a 13-year-old daughter, Gianna. So we're right in the throes of the teenage years and having fun. It's actually very fun to have Heath just a half step ahead of us, Heath and Misty. So we get to learn from all of from their mistakes. They don't make a bunch of mistakes. They're great parents, but for us, it's kind of fun to see what they're doing well and emulate that. And so it's fun to be in this kind of stage of life and similar stages of life together, kind of walking through and learning from them.
Joe, you say it's not a work day unless you've cried or you made someone else cry. So has it been a work day for you yet?
That's a great question. No, it's not yet. But we need to see what we can do in the next few minutes here. No tears yet. This does feel abnormal.
You live in Knoxville, Tennessee. So you're Tennessee Vols fans, both of you. You kind of Joey, you're going to tell us you're from Oklahoma in a second. That's good stuff right there. So you kind of have to be a little bit of a Tennessee Vols fan, right?
Well, just to survive. I mean, it's purely a facade. I have some orange in my closet. If you didn't, I think they'd send they'd send people over to put you in an orange hoodie or something. So we've lived here 18 months. But I'll tell you, it is fun to be in Knoxville, especially the football's good right now. Heath has a great tailgate and tickets, and so we sing Rocky Top for sure in our home. We've really enjoyed living in Knoxville and following the Vols.
Yeah, I'm from East Tennessee, so I grew up in a place called Johnson City, which is about 2 hours away, northeast Tennessee, almost in Virginia. I went to school at University of Tennessee, but Joey and I actually met in Atlanta. So I spent 23 years in Atlanta. We actually met at North Point Community Church, Andy Stanley's campus. We met at a men's breakfast at 7 a.m. on a Thursday. He tells the story a lot better than I do, but large room, a lot of guys, all trying to be better husbands, fathers, friends. I was in the throes of another business that I had started. And I kind of came dressed like I'm dressed right now in a hoodie. So I looked a little less professional than everyone else in the room. And when Joey met me, he thought, if you were to say, he thought I was either homeless or without a job.
Maybe money, definitely unemployed. I was for sure he was unemployed, Ron. There was no question. Because everybody's wearing Navy blazers, and this is in Buckhead and Atlanta. And so, but then here comes this guy in a hoodie, and I'm sure he's unemployed. So, of course, being the good Christian man I am, I took him under my wing. And then I realized later that week I was reading the Wall Street Journal, and I read a quote from Heath and realized that he was not unemployed, that he had a job, a business that he started. And it was that moment I realized the fine line between entrepreneur and unemployed. It's such a fine line, and you can kind of go one way or the other.
And Joey's been wearing hoodies ever since.
And I've been wearing hoodies ever since.
Nice. You rubbed up on it. Hey, you guys say on your website, it's no secret that screen time is one of the biggest issues facing families today. And we're not just talking about kids. Joey and I both struggle with this amazing, and I love the way you describe a phone, right? An amazing, captivating, infinitely powerful tool that we call a smartphone. You both have some powerful stories about the time when you realized, okay, this smartphone, this captivating, infinitely powerful tool has captivated me a little bit too much. And so I'd love for you to tell those stories. Whoever wants to go first, but both of your stories are amazing with your child's project and then the soccer game. Just take off on that.
Happy to. I've got plenty of stories of failure, which is what these all have in common. It'd be great if my wife were here to tell them. Actually, it'd be good to get her perspective. Because she would tell you, 2005 or 6, when I walked up the stairs in our apartment with a BlackBerry, I was so excited. And her recollection is that was the worst day of her life, just knowing that I could stay connected to the office all the time. So, fast forward a few years, the smartphone comes out, which is even more captivating, even more powerful. There was this realization, and it came through the form of a school project, which you mentioned. I think probably 5th grade son at the time, just fills in the blanks on a project from his teacher and said, what do you want to give your dad for Christmas? Pretty benign question. Wasn't a tie. He actually said, I want to give my dad the gift of family time, which from a 5th grader, one, that's pretty advanced in terms of like his thought process around it. But 2, what he was really saying was, my dad is not around. Right? Or my dad is not present. And the truth was, he was right. I was traveling a bunch. I was busy a bunch. I was at work late. And even when I was at home, and this is really where the tension started, I was captivated by my phone, right? I felt important. I felt powerful. I felt like I needed to be connected. And I just let that kind of overtake my priorities. One more story, and this is kind of really where the aha moment kicked in. One night, my wife and I were out to dinner. And normally at dinner, I would have my phone up and I would be checking things and, answering calls and those types of things. That night, for whatever reason, and it wasn't prompted, I just picked up my phone and I gave it to her and I said, hey, take this. Don't just take it, but put it in your purse. Like, I don't want it tonight. I just want to focus on each other. And when I tell this story, I always tell people, you would have thought I had given her a new car. She was that surprised and that ecstatic and excited because she knew, right? She knew that this thing was the primary distraction getting in the way of connection, getting in the way of our relationship. So again, I probably got another 50 stories I could tell you, but I made a lot of mistakes along the way. And I think it was those mistakes that, honestly are the underpinnings of this business and why we feel so passionate about the topic itself.
Joey, tell your story. Soccer game.
Sure. Yeah. This goes back about 10 years. So my son Harrison, who I mentioned, he was 5 at the time. And this was a ordinary Saturday afternoon, but that particular day, something really extraordinary happened. So, and I think back, Ron, on this story, almost like it's in slow motion. I can kind of see it happening, playing out in my head with Harrison midway in the soccer field, rearing back his leg, kicking the ball. And it just kind of slowly, in my mind, slow motion, just kind of rolls into the back of the net. Now, Harrison had not scored a goal all season. He was the last kid to have not scored a goal. So this was a big deal on the team. The coach picks him up and the crowd goes wild and everybody kind of knew what happened. The last kid on the team to score a goal scored a goal. But right before all the celebration happened, instantly after he did that, he did what a 5-year-old boy would do, which was turn to the sidelines to lock eyes with me, to have this moment with me where he sees the pride on my face and the smile on my face. And honestly, this was a magical moment, except that when he looked over, all he saw was the top of my head because I was looking down at my phone and I missed the entire moment, the entire scene. I missed that. And there was just this, my wife told me, I say today I still have bruises on my ribs from her elbow telling me that I had missed it. And it was just one of these moments, Ron, where I just thought, that doesn't feel right. That there's in fact, I read a proverb this morning. I think it's Proverbs 14:1, where it basically says like a wise woman builds up her home, but with her own hands, she tears it down. And I thought, I thought for myself, I've built up this great thing. I have all these great aspirations as a dad. I've built up this home. We've made kids. We had 2 kids at the time. We have this, all we put into it. But with the same hands that I built the home, I was tearing it down. I was tearing down the same home for myself in my actions, in these little things. Like, why would we put so much effort towards kids and then immediately forget about it? And it was truly, and this was my, it's my own propensity to be distracted and to be, enthralled with things. But it was this thing in my pocket. And more than that, it was this relationship with this thing in my pocket. We don't demonize phones. We do talk about the relationship we have with them and how that impacts the relationships with everyone around them. And in that moment, something was wrong. That relationship was killing what I would say is a top 3 relationship in my life.
It seems like our lives are on our phones, right? We communicate, text, emails, personal and business. When my wife gets on to me for being on the phone, I say, "Hey, this is business. I need to do this. And if I deal with this now, I won't have to deal with it later." Right? Always an excuse. Our contacts are on there. Our Bibles are on there now. Notes, entertainment. So what are we up against? And particularly when you guys put it kind of bringing human features to this phone, like. We have a relationship with this thing. So kind of talk about what we're up against before we get into some solutions.
We're up against something that this has happened so insidiously in such a quick amount of time. I mean, like in the term insidious means just kind of that slow creep you don't notice, which is weird because it's happened in a short amount of time. But when we say relationship with our phones, no one ever really asks, like, what are you talking about? And so we as a society, we talk about our relationship with our phones. As we've thought about this, we thought, hold on a second. That's weird. What do we have a relationship with our phones? This is the only object in our lives that we have a relationship with. I spend a little bit of time with my lawnmower throughout the year, but I see it about once a week, about 9 months out of the year. What I don't do is go kind of have a little conversation with it. I don't, when it gets boring, I don't sneak in a quick mow in a conversation. So it's this thing, I don't have a relationship. And that, like anything else, I guess the closest thing we could think is maybe our cars. Maybe some people do, but that still is a thing that gets us from point A to point B. So the fact that we have a relationship with our phones is weird, but it can only be defined as a relationship because relationships are defined by 3 important characteristics. One of them is proximity. We have our phones with us. 91% of us have our phones with us all the time. So it is proximate to us. It's close to us like a very close friend. Second one is interaction. Relationships are defined by interaction. We are interacting with it constantly. Now, what's interesting about when you think about phones, people say, oh, just silence your notifications. You won't use it as much. The problem with that theory is that our cell phone usage is self-initiated 89% of the time. So we're the ones initiating this usage of our phones, and we're constantly interacting with us. And the third one is what you just touched on. The third characteristic of a relationship is dependence, this level of dependence. And this is where it gets tricky because the easier message here, Ron, is to say your phone is bad, go get a flip phone. Smartphones are bad, smartphones are the devil, get rid of them. That's not practical because of the things that happen on our phone. We have a level of dependence on our phones. And I don't mean in a really bad way necessarily either. Like you said, jump on YouVersion and read the Bible, or get somewhere, use Waze, go A to B, or use a flashlight or one of the countless other things. You look at the list of the devices that phones have replaced. That all adds up to a relationship that we have with our device that I would say is, at least right now, is inescapable for adults. Now, that relationship, the way it's a little bit out of whack, when it starts interfering with our real relationships, that's when it becomes catastrophic. And so you look at, let's think about it as parents. For our kids, and then for our marriages, our kids, teenage unhappiness is at an all-time high. And it started about 15 years ago. And when I say unhappiness, that's not their pouty walking around the house. We're talking about like actually clinical depression and suicidal ideation. And it's catastrophic what's happening to our kids. Now, I don't want to be too reductive and say that it's all because of us parents looking at our phones, but this is the first generation of kids who has had parents who have looked at a screen instead of their eyes. And so there's some absolute causation there in our relationship with our phones. When we get to our marriages, this is an interesting one too, is that divorce rates are about the same. They haven't actually moved. But what we're seeing is a little bit deeper than that. And I would not say the success of a marriage is based on whether you're divorced or not. And I think most people would agree with that. I would say where we're really suffering is we're in an intimacy crisis, and it's a crisis in our marriage, is that we're in this constant state of our spouse opening up to us, and all it takes is a glance at our phone, and that kills the intimacy in that moment. But it doesn't just kill intimacy in that moment. It kills our partner's likelihood of being intimate with us later. And I don't mean sexual. I just mean actually like being close and opening up. And so we're rewiring our brains and our expectations of our partners. And so we're kind of suffering from an intimacy basis. So it is damaging our relationships in a severe way. And we have to do something. And you think about with our kids specifically, if we don't do something for our kids, and again, I have a 15-year-old and 13-year-old, if we don't do something, then this generation of kids will be the first generation of kids who will die with more of other people's memories than memories they create on their own. So they're taking in other people's memories. They're watching other people enjoy great things instead of experiencing themselves. So for us, I mean, that's reason enough alone. We have to do something about it. And here's the good news is we're still early enough to do something about it. This ship has not sailed yet. We can still do something about it.
I love your all's podcast. You guys do a great job on that. And you interviewed this lady, Dr. Felicia Wu Song. And I'd like you guys to comment on this. I love what she said. She said she talked about the natural progressions, and she said we accept the myth that whatever comes next with theology, we have to accept. Business modes, the media, and powers are making all those decisions for us, and we're just being fed this technology, and we're like, okay, that's the next thing, so let's do it, and then that's the next thing. So talk a little bit about how we stop this natural progression. Now, it's complex too, because, right, it's happening all around us, and our kids are in it, and everybody's doing it. Everybody has the next best thing. But man, as Christians, as parents who realize we have a responsibility to lead our children and lead them well. First of all, we got to deal with the phone ourselves. That's number one. You can't impart what you don't possess. I mean, if you're gonna be on it all the time, how are you going to tell your kids not to be? But talk to parents about you don't have to do the natural progression thing.
Yeah, well, a couple things. I mean, gosh, you know this as a father, it is tough when every other kid is doing something that your kids want to do. So there's a long conversation there around just parenting tactics. But with any new tech, I mean, think about cars as a good example. Cars did not used to have seatbelts, right? And after enough accidents and the data to demonstrate that it was unhealthy and not safe, we now have seatbelts, and that's regulated. Smoking's a good example too, right? It wasn't until secondhand smoke was identified as something, it's one thing to hurt yourself, right? It's another thing to hurt those around you, particularly those that are close to you and your kids. We saw a big decline in smoking once secondhand smoke was identified. The great news right now for our devices is that we have that data. Joey touched on some of the statistics now. So one, we have all felt it for a while. I always tell people if we'd have started this business 10 years ago, I would have had to spend a lot of time educating and explaining to you why this was bad. I don't have to tell anyone today. They know it, they feel it, they see it, they've experienced it, they've been on the receiving end of it. And now we have plenty of reports that support that. So there will be some changes. Certainly there are businesses being started, like ours and others that are focused on screen time, and ours is focused on the relationship with the device and modeling. But I also think there will be regulations in place, particularly for kids. Look, the reality is kids can't drive till they're 16. They can't, do harmful things till they're 18. They can't even vote until they're 18, right? So why are we giving our kids social media at 12 and 13? Why are we giving them a device at 9 and 10? And where you started this, I do think as a society, we have really leaned into this idea that we always have to be on call. And we've convinced ourselves that it's necessary because of the, 1 in a million scenario and the fear of the call. And it just doesn't happen. And that's the interesting thing that we notice with our customers. Once they start using RO in this case, and they start to build a muscle around putting down their phone and taking time away from it, they start to realize, oh, this fear that I have, just doesn't come true. Right. So yeah, I think part of it is like just recognizing, hey, we were the guinea pigs, and that's fine. But now we have the data to support that. And it's up to us as leaders in our family, as leaders in the community, to start to make changes. And those changes, as you said, must start with the parents. We say that RO is built by parents for parents, because the reality is our kids are going to model or mimic what they see as model, right? And if we model poorly, they're going to mimic poorly. And then guess what? We get mad at them for mimicking what we've modeled. So this weird cycle that we've developed right now. So man, if we could just get parents to rethink the relationship. And by the way, what I've noticed for me personally, now that I don't have quite the level of captivation with my phone, one thing I noticed, which is really important, I'm not that important, right? You're not that important. Joey's not that important. We're just not that important. And I think that's a beautiful kind of side effect of starting to disconnect from your devices, is that you realize, hey, I'm just not that important. Right. And there's a beauty and a kind of freeing humility in that, that then encourages you to, again, model that for the rest of your family.
For parents, and you guys touched on this earlier, give us the landscape. What's happening with our kids? So, we all know the aspect of loneliness, the aspect of just the blue light that impacts the brain, a lack of sleep, all these things. So just kind of paint that picture for parents about what these devices, used to say just smartphones, now it's like, all these different devices. What are they doing to our kids? Now we have the data.
I'll drill down on one specific thing for this one. And this is something that we overlook and we kind of say it in passing, but I don't know that we can exactly underscore this enough, is the detriment to sleep. And I'll just say to any parent listening right now, your child under 18 should not have their phone in the room overnight. And by the way, we prescribe very little, Ron. There's very little prescription we say, but that's the one thing I'll say right now. 18 or under, get the phone out of the room. The most effective torture still, throughout all the history of all the contraptions they've come up with, the most effective form of torture is sleep deprivation. Still, that's the thing. And so you have a child who is trying to, I'll say a child again, under 18, who probably in some ways feels like they're bearing the weight of the world on an everyday basis, no matter what. So this is forgetting what's happening on Snapchat or TikTok or whatever it is. But even just the load of schoolwork or sports pressure or whatever it may be, or just friendship issues, when you magnify that with sleep deprivation, it is a 50x result and everything seems wrong. Now, again, my son's 15. He does not have access to Safari on his phone. If I would have had the internet in my bedroom at 15 years old, I would have never slept. And that's not even all the bad stuff you can get there. I'm just talking about the pure enjoyment, entertainment you can get on there. And so I don't think that parents quite, and again, I'll preempt they use that as an alarm clock. I get it. And I'll send you an alarm clock if you need it. I'll send you my address because they exist and you can do that without having your phone. But the downside, and I think people are waking up to the potential downside here. I mean, this in some ways, Ron, is like, It's almost like how people woke up to exercise, a few years ago as they realized, okay, this is really important. I really have to do this. But even then, let's acknowledge this is a difficult thing to do. It's hard to be a parent. It's hard for us to manage it as parents. And so all these gyms popped up all across the country to do what? To remove the friction of doing something difficult but valuable. So it's hard to build up the discipline. You can burn calories and build muscle for free, but sometimes we need the next step. And I even think if you want to spiritualize it, and Jesus says, and you may accuse me of heresy, but hear me out. I think we can disobey what Jesus said when he said, if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off. The good news is I don't think we have to cut off limbs for this. So you don't fully have to follow the letter of the law. But what Jesus is saying is let's go to every extreme to make sure we avoid the pitfalls of sin. And again, I'm not using sin and like looking at nefarious things on your phone. I'm saying all the things that can misguide us from the purpose that's in us. So that's a bit of a long-winded way to say for parents, even if we just focused on sleep, I think that would have tremendous change in our families and for our kids. So if it's in the room overnight, I would encourage everybody, make that change today.
So Heath, you said you have not had your phone with you at night for a long time now. For someone listening and saying, I don't know if I can sleep, if that phone's not next to me, my alarm, that's where I charge it, the whole bit. Talk that person down off the I have to have my phone with me at night, Cliff.
Yeah, well, I mean, the solving for the charging, solving for the alarms, the easy part. I think the harder part is, letting go of the fear of, a call in the middle of the night or something happening. So I would say, and it depends on the age of your kids or your parents in particular, if they have health issues. But, for instance, my older kids, high school seniors, they may be out later at a dance or some event. If that's the case, either my wife or I is going to have a phone available, until early hours in the morning. But on most nights, let's call it, 6.9 nights out of 7, right? That's not happening. Everyone's in bed at a decent time frame. I just don't need it. Mm-hmm. And to be honest with you, if I did get that dreaded call from a parent or grandparent that had passed away at 3 or 4 in the morning, there's nothing I can do anyway. Right. So there's nothing is going to change in terms of my response from 3 in the morning until, 9 in the morning. So I've just gotten very comfortable with the fact that it's just not something that I need at night. And again, once you build that discipline, not even discipline, once you build the muscle around it, it gets much easier. But yeah, I would say it starts small, but also recognize the stage of life you're in. I mean, I certainly understand if, and I've got a 90-year-old grandmother, which by the way, I connected with on FaceTime a few weeks ago. Amazing, right? Another good use of the phone. But yeah, if you have situations that require it, don't beat yourself up. We're also a no guilt and no shame company. So we don't, as Joey said earlier, we don't demonize. We're not here to say, use your phone less screen time. That's not how we measure success. We actually measure success by relationship. We also measure success by, hey, you as a family determine what's sacred. What are the sacred times for your family? For our family, it's bedtime. It's family dinners. It's any time, honestly, we're gathered around a table or in a circle where we have the opportunity to have conversation. Those are, and that could be TV as well, by the way. I think too many of us miss an opportunity to connect, even watching a show, because we're scrolling at the same time that we're watching. And it's just very different. Everyone knows this. It's very different watching a movie or watching TV with that's the only screen in front of you versus scrolling. So yeah, baby steps along the way. By the way, this is some of the same advice we give families. We say when your kids are young, the stakes are really high, but the pain is low. To implement this, right, to start this discipline. When they're teenagers, the stakes are still high, but the pain is really high. So we start really small with teenagers. Start modeling, well when they're young, but when they become teenagers, if they have developed a habit and a relationship around this device, start with those small, start with the family dinner, start with the bedtime, those simple things you can implement as a family.
We'd be remiss not to give the stakes are high, pain are low. That was some sage advice from a living sage named Scott Kaufman, who's at Praxis, who's just a brilliant man who gave us some great insight into that. And it's such a good point. When your kids are young, the stakes are still equally high, and if you wait long enough, the pain's going to be equally high at the stakes, and you don't want to get to that point. So this message is for everybody, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but this message is for everybody. But if you're a younger parent, what an amazing opportunity right now what an amazing, if you're a parent of any age, if you're in a relationship of any kind, like what an amazing opportunity. But goodness, for kids who are young, for parents to get this right, this is the greatest, most hopeful opportunity any of us have in relationships today, is to get this one right.
One of my favorite passages in Scripture is Ezra 7:10. Ezra set his heart to study the Word of God, and then do it, and then teach it to others. And I love that passage because, we're actually putting what we know into practice, and then we're teaching it to others. And when I heard about you guys and heard your stories, I thought, there's finally an Ezra 10, Ezra 7:10, right? We could go on and on about what phones do to us, what phones do to our kids. Man, we could fill our time with statistics. But parents know that. Man, you could Google now until Christ comes again and still not read every article on what's happening. But I see parents, okay, so I'll put myself in there too, even though my kids are older. We know things, right? Back to the Ezra 10, we know things, got a head full of knowledge, we know, but the doing, that's the challenge. And I love it that you guys said, okay, wake up call, poster, and there needs to be more family time. I just missed a significant event. And then God put you guys together and you created this thing called Aro. So tell us about that and what it does, why it's important, and how it can help. I think particularly young parents getting this thing in early on and developing those habits. Like you say, stakes are high, but the habits can be established early on. That's just the culture of our home. That's just what we do. So I'm going to give it to you guys. Tell us about Aro.
Well, I think you touched on, one of the impetus behind this was, or the catalyst was, hey, we have great intentions for our lives. We really do. And I would suspect that most people listening to this or watching this have great intentions as well. But for some reason, this phone gets in the way of a lot of those intentions, particularly with our family. So I had, I had a bunch of stories. I had that moment where I thought, and by the way, I consider myself a fairly disciplined person, right, across all areas of life, but I found myself failing over and over again. So
that's a little undersell. Heath is he's an Ironman triathlete. He's the disciplined of the disciplined.
Well, I had tried several times. I had purchased apps to get myself off apps. I'd said I'm going to leave the phone in the car. I said I'm going to leave it out of the bedroom, all those things. And I failed over and over again. So I had this realization. Then I started doing a bunch of research on what was available. I read a bunch of books on habits. You talked about, habits earlier. And one thing kind of struck me is two things. One is we don't really have a place for our phone. We have a place for everything else in our lives for the most part. And because we didn't have a place, we would put it in our pocket or put it on the table in front of us. And the other was, James Clear says, environment is stronger than willpower, right? And when my environment is set up in a way that's not conducive to the habits and the intentions that I have, I'm just going to fail. It's the same reason why if you put, your Peloton bike in the basement in the dungeon, probably you're not going to ride it as much as if you see it on the main floor and you walk by it every day. So with those kind of realizations, Joey and I set out and said, let's just do some testing, right? Let's start with just a simple, wooden box. Let's give it to some families. We built this little throwaway app and said, hey, just let's do some testing, see what they say. And we heard two things. One is people love getting credit for the time that they're intentional. Like they love the pat on the back. And that's something you don't get if you leave the phone in the car or you put it in a drawer. There's just no way to measure that other than, self-measurement. And the second thing that was really powerful is we asked them, we said, how did you feel? And they all said the same thing. They said, we're so proud of ourselves, which is pretty embarrassing. But at the same time, pride is an incredible motivator, right? So with those two learnings, we set out to build something that could be a platform and a system and a habit forming, system for a family. So Aro is the combination of what we call beautiful home decor hardware box, for lack of a better word, that lives in a high traffic area of the house, typically a kitchen or a family room. We say it's wife approved, it's mom approved, so it is gorgeous, and we spend a lot of time on the aesthetics. But it's meant to fit in the home so that it's not an eyesore. But more importantly, it becomes a symbol for a family's values. So every time you walk past the RO box, in a way it's calling out to you saying, hey, I'm here. You said you have these intentions for your lives. I'm going to help you achieve those intentions. And by the way, you're home. This is probably where your phone needs to go for a little while. But we knew it couldn't just be a thing, right? Everyone has a drawer. Everyone has a basket. Everyone has a shoebox even. So we built an app. Again, we're a technology company. We built an app to help motivate, encourage, pat you on the back, track all of your time, allow you to tag that time. Really just a way to encourage you along this path of intention. And it gets the family involved as well. And what's so interesting about young families, and this is just so cool, honestly, the kids, parents, we always say parents need to model better, right? So in the context of RO, that would be, hey, Heath, you as a dad, put your phone away. But actually what we're seeing is, let's call young Heath with young kids, the kids are actually taking their parents' phones and putting it away. Mm. So what does that tell us, right? That tells us that they notice, A, and that B, they see that as the primary obstacle to, mommy and daddy time. And they see this thing, this box thingy, as some of our clients call it, this box thingy as the thing that solves for their attention with their parents. So again, it's just a combination of a place, it's a combination of some technology, but more importantly, I would say it's the fact that it's a symbol of the values that your family represents. Yeah.
So if you're watching or listening, you can go to goaro.com, and you can see this box thingy for yourself, and this app that goes with it. It is a beautiful device. But man, I just think it's so significant that there is this this place where all the family, it's a value, right?
Yeah.
Our family values this, and here's a place where we're going to say, we're putting this down so that we can have conversation and interaction, play a board game, and get to know one another a little bit, right? I love what you say. It's interesting. People like rewards, and people like to feel, particularly Gen Z, they're a feeling generation, so they like to feel, right? How many times do our kids say that? I feel like. I always say, do you feel it or do you believe it? And I feel like. They feel proud of what they've done. So just give us a little bit more. So I've got the box. I put my phone in there. I've got the app. How do I get rewarded, or how do I feel better about myself?
Well, and we've mentioned habit a few times, and I want to make an important distinction here. When we're talking about our relationship with our phone, for the vast majority of us, the 99% of us, this is actually a habit we're dealing with. Yet, when we talk about this, what's the word everybody says? They almost say it in jest. They say, "Oh, so addicted to my phone, so addicted to my phone." So we're using that. I don't know that people actually mean that literally. Some might. But when we talk about addiction versus habit, there's a really important distinction there, because with addiction, you do two things at first. One, you say that I'm totally powerless over the thing. And then the second thing is you completely abstain from the thing. With a habit, it's a lot different. And with our phones, we're not suggesting either one of those. We're actually saying, one, you don't have to abstain from it. You need to change your relationship with it. And two, you have agency over it. You are not powerless in the situation. So you have some agency over it. So the reason that's important is the whole RO system is designed around the science of habit formation, which is that begins with a cue of, in this case, it's a visual cue, or it's the app reminding you to put your phone down, which leads to a routine, which is the physical act of putting down your phone. And again, the moment you do that, as we said earlier, you've just joined the 9% club. Only 9% of people put their phones down on a daily basis. But then that crescendos in the reward. And the reward here is multifaceted. Within the app, we built in a reward system. And all of us know, if you've ever been on Duolingo or something, one of the most powerful motivators for Duolingo, for example, is the fact that you're on a streak. In fact, I am right now on a 199-day streak of learning French every single day. And I'll be darned if I'm going to break that streak, because it's a powerful thing that I see. I got to keep that streak going. So that's a powerful motivator. So that reward of continuing to do the thing. But then we also have taken, frankly, a lot of the tips and tricks that the social media companies have used to keep us on our phone. So, or the fitness trackers have done. So you set a daily goal of time away from your phone, or you get achievement badges, or on and on. But we the thing we really know, reward is not those things, the pats on the back within the app. The reward is what happens on the other side. That's where the real reward comes in. There's nothing inspirational, motivational about putting down your phone. There is something motivational and inspiration about having a talk with your 13-year-old daughter when she's had a hard day. That's the good stuff. There is a great thing going out and playing basketball with your son. There is reward in you and sitting and having a really maybe difficult conversation with your wife that breaks through to something that's really at the core of what's bothering her. So that's where the real reward comes in, is what are we doing on the other side of putting our phones down, of establishing those rhythms, those habits, those things that are really going to last over a lifetime. And so we get that with the little breadcrumbs within the in-app rewards. But again, we all know it's what happens, the life that happens on the other side is the real reward.
Talk about some of the, if I go out to eat, I go check out to see how people rate that restaurant. Talk about some of the responses you've gotten back. Kind of give us some real success stories about people who say, man, here's how this thing changed the dynamic of our family.
Ron, when we started this, Heath said, I'm going to spend as much money as I need to solve this for my family. And if I solve for my family, I bet you we can solve it for yours. And if we solve it for yours, I bet you we can for ours. I bet you we can solve it for a lot of families. But at that time, we didn't know if there was a market at all for this, if people were feeling the same pain. And so we and I mean this quite literally, every week our dreams come true because we hear a story of some family that has been intersected with this, some family who was, and it's not they were looking for something, they were desperate for something. And that's the story we get. I was so desperate and I had tried everything. So one of my favorite stories comes from the Mitchell family in Houston. So this woman who's an RO member, she said, I had tried everything and I really wanted to be present with my family. My husband works offshore. He's 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. And when he's home, he has a hard time being focused. I have a hard time being focused. And in the meantime, their 5-year-old sons would literally say to them, Mommy, Daddy, please put down your phone. Put down your phone. Just again. I think parents have recognized that. I hear that a bunch. We hear stories of kids grabbing their parents' faces to look at them. And so she was in a moment of desperation. And she said, as she ordered RO, and in her words, she says, it's changed her life. It's changed her family. She says what happens now, the normal for her boys is mom and dad to look in their eyes instead of at their phone. And Heath referenced this earlier, and it happens all the time. They'll go take their phones. Mommy, do you need your phone right now? And they'll just take it from her. So she's created little monsters, she said, and they'll go put it in the RO box for them. But think of the reverberating effects from that. So real change happens over 3 generations. So that's actual change, sustainable change happens over 3 generations. That's 2 generations right there. We're 2/3 of the way there with the Mitchell family because of what they've normalized for their kids. And that's normal for their kids. So what do we think they're going to do whenever they have kids someday? What about when they just start being around friends or maybe even going on dates someday? What's normal to them? Normal to them is eye contact, not somebody looking down at their screen. So that's where, and we've had just candidly like some very fresh vision on this is multi-generational change that's happening. And so for somebody listening, this is not over dramatizing. We had a friend the other day, an RO member, who was saying that he sat there at Christmas and he watched his father totally lost in his phone. His dad was totally lost in his phone. And our friend looked at his 1-year-old son and he goes, I'm going to change that. I'm going to reverse it. And so think about this amazing opportunity that all of us have right in front of us. Yes, the change are drastic, but this is, I think, the most powerful lever in life, a lever, something that requires smaller effort, but has outsized results. What a lever we have right now just to do this literally by just putting down our phones. And I think it's really important here for anybody listening to embrace what I'm about to say is studies are coming out again and again and again about the power of self-compassion, about how much more likely you are to do something if you can be kind to yourself in the meantime. So if you've not quite gotten this one right, you're in good company. That's why we started it, because we hadn't gotten it right. But just have some compassion on yourself. Acknowledge this is kind of hard. Yeah, that's why businesses are built around this, because it's a little bit hard. It is worth it. If you get it wrong today, have a little compassion on yourself. Say, I'm doing my best, and I'm gonna go get after it tomorrow. So I think that kindness to ourselves in pursuing this goal, knowing this is a lifetime commitment, That's really what's going to sustain the change. If you can be kind to yourself and recognize that it's hard, but know that you're working in the right direction.
We're going to encourage those watching and listening to go to goro.com and check this out. So many good resources on there besides the box and the app. So my son he was a Ironman competition as well, my son-in-law. And it was always interesting because we'd be at family gatherings or whatever, and someone would say, "Hey, Josiah," he coached other runners. "Hey, Josiah, I want to get in shape. What do I do?" And he would say, "Well, get up tomorrow morning and go walk a block, and then do that the next day, and then do that the next day, and then next week get up and walk a block and run a block." So I would have said, "Hey, go run 4 miles the first day," and then someone would have done it one time, and that's it. So you're talking to a young mom out there. She pretty close to a digital native. She's got 3 kids. Life is crazy. She's trying to keep up with it. She may be working remotely. And she hears this. She knows she needs to do something, but getting through the day and getting those kids through the day and in bed, she's exhausted. Maybe her husband, is not quite engaged. And so she's getting a lot of interaction through her phone. But she knows she's got to do something. So I love it that you guys are saying, you can't win it all in one day. So talk to that person about some first steps.
Well, I'm not good speaking on behalf of women, but I'll try to provide some first steps. My wife definitely gives me some insight, so hopefully I can draw upon those. I will say, as men, like, how often do we come up with the next harebrained idea and we're going to go do this, and 3 days later, our wife's like, "I thought you said we were," So I say that only because, typically RO is, it's purchased by, the one of the spouses. And, usually there's a lot more tension felt from, in this case, let's say the mom. I think, particularly with kids, the easiest time to go RO is when the kids are home. If the kids are out, then it's a little more, there's more anxiety around, getting everyone in the house. So the first thing I would say is maybe spend 10 or 15 minutes just thinking about your rhythms and your routines as a family, and then decide, hey, where in our day does it make sense for me to not have my phone? For instance, if you are a homeschool mom, teacher, you probably don't want to be on your phone the whole time as you're trying to, teach math or English or something else. So there may be a good example. Again, I would say family dinners is a great place to start. If you have, if there is a spiritual discipline rhythm, that's a great time to put your phone on. My wife, actually, this is kind of a funny story, but Joey and I have been building this business for a couple of years, and she followed it along, but she wasn't the best RO user. And then one day I come home from work, she's like, I get it. I finally get it. I said, "What do you mean?" She goes, "I did my Bible study this morning and I put my phone down." And she goes, "And for the first time ever, it was my time. I wasn't thinking about anyone else. I wasn't taking a picture of a verse, sending it to someone." She goes, "I realized, like, no, this is my time to be fully present. This is my time to have, some personal time and reflective time." So start small, find those rhythms in your routine that make sense. And I would say don't force it to your significant other.
Yeah.
They're actually going to adopt it if they see you develop a habit and they see change in you. If you just mandate that, hey, your husband's got to put his phone down, or wife's got to put their phone down, it will be met with defensiveness. I mean, how many times have you been sitting on the couch, me sitting on the couch, my wife says, "Heath, get off your phone." Well, my first initial response, we talked about this at the outset, it's like, well, I'm doing important stuff. I'm working, whatever. But it's different if I just notice that she's more present. I notice that she's attentive to my needs at some point, either from guilt or from, just seeing the change in her. I'm going to adopt, and I'm going to say, man, I like what she's figured out. I like what she's doing. I want more of that. And then once you have that one experience, for us, it was that dinner out one night. It could be the family dinner where you actually have deeper conversation. Once you have that one experience, you want it over and over and over again. And that's what starts to build in that habit.
The one addition is something Heath referenced earlier, is find a sacred time or find a sacred place. So a sacred time could be during dinner time, or it could be in a sacred place. I think for let's say that mom that you just described, the sacred place could be your child's bedroom. So right before you walk in to tuck them in, just drop your phone outside of the door. Just let that be your sacred place. Like, okay, I'm going to make this a digital free zone when I'm in my child's bedroom. So find those, and we're talking, because this is a habit, here's the good news, is it's something you can build up over time. So build that muscle. Like Josiah said, just build that muscle slowly over time. Start with the 5-minute tuck in at night. What a great place to start. And here's the cool thing. Your kids will instantly notice the difference.
Guys, it's good stuff. We talk a lot here in our ministry about integrated discipleship. So it's got to start with you, right? I've got to be devoted to wanting a relationship with Christ and doing the things I need to do to build it. And then discipleship in marriage, and then discipleship with our kids. And, one of the barriers to that is the distractions of screen time. And so I love what you guys are doing, because it's very practical, it's very doable, but man, the rewards, the benefits are not only getting to know each other in the family, which is critical, but getting to have that relationship with Christ that continues to grow. So we disciple each other, we grow together as a husband and wife and a family. So thank you guys for what you're doing. Really appreciate it. And I want to encourage everyone to go to GoRO.com. Check out the resources that you have. And thank you for your work. I think you guys have a great ministry, and just really appreciate all you're doing. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ron.
Yeah, thank you, Ron.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Joey and Heath. Did you hear what they said? 90% of the time, we are the ones who initiate engagement with our phones. Most of the time, our phones are within an arm's length, even when we sleep. Screen time is an issue we have to do something about. And today you've heard a way to deal with it, a way to change. But real change, well, that's up to you. Hey, if this podcast has been helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Share it with others. Thanks so much for joining us on this Journey podcast. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen.